Friday, December 7th, 2018, Scott Hensler Tinfoil Hat Club. Well, you know, Pearl Harbor, World War II, the Japanese, still enemies with China. There's really not a lot of talk about that. When I was over in Taiwan, there was still a lot of animosity between the Japanese and the Chinese. The things that went on during World War II, the invasion of with the Japanese into China, even in Taiwan, the beheading, using their women as prostitutes for their soldiers. And there was a lot of feedback about them wanting an apology. And the Japanese just said, absolutely not. We are not going to apologize for what we did to you during World War II. And Fukushima happened within days after that. So is that technology that came from China to cause the earthquake, to cause the EMP attack or the glow or the corona that happened over the epicenter? Well, I believe it was. I believe it was directed energy weapons. But what we're going to talk tonight about is ghost cities. And Pat has joined me. Pat has been around on the show before, almost a year ago. And he's actually visiting here with me in Nevada, helping me out put some things together, some heavy-duty construction work. And so we're going to talk about the ghost cities. Before we get into that, though, again, you know, as we move forward into the coming 2019, we're very quickly getting out of 2018. There's a lot of speculation. There's a lot of hype. There's a lot of good information, a lot of false information about what's coming. Now, Russia and the incidences that are taking place with them, those things that are with Israel, having to do with Trump, having to do with 5G, even the negotiation with China to come in and usher some technology that really we gave them back in the 80s. And thank you, Clinton, for serving them on a platter the technology to zero in for atomic weapons, where before, you know, they may be a quarter mile off or a mile off, then they were right down to just a yard or two. And so as we move forward into this time, there's a lot of information that is pointing out that there's the potential of the martial law and roundup to bring us in to a compartmentalized agenda 21, putting us only in cities, getting us out of the urban areas, getting us out of the country, and putting us into high rises so we're controlled, or even the elimination of us in high numbers, as the Georgia Guidestones talks about. So I'm going to make the statement for those who are Trump supporters. Now, you need to understand that I've been saying from day one who Trump is and what he's really doing, because anyone who's in the occult, anyone who has any position of authority or elected or semi-elected, as we see with Obama in his past, that they know exactly what's going on. They're in bed with the elite. Whether they're supporting Israel or not, the point of it is, and I'm not an Israel supporter. And for those who think that as a Christian deliverance minister that I should be supporting them, you need to understand that everything that we have today is a lie. That those things that came through Zionism, those things that come through the teachings in the church today, that the lies that have been told to the Christians to support those things that are supposed to be given of God and that they're God's chosen people, you need to read the New Testament. Read the New Testament yourself. There are conditions. There are those things in place saying if you obey, if you do these things. And unfortunately, there are those who have not. And so we are in a point in time that the New World Order, the Illuminati, those of the occult, those who have been doing things for centuries to put themselves in a position to take over the world and eliminate God's people, eliminate Jesus Christ, eliminate God. Because when you're in trouble and you call out in the name of Jesus Christ, the power and authority through his blood comes in and intervenes. And so removing the name of Jesus Christ and supplying all these other names, and I'm not going to get into that, puts you in a position that the demons do not have to stand down. And I've got some guests coming in the next couple of weeks and the next month set up, but I want to get back into the very fact that if you are completely eliminated from using the name of Jesus Christ, demons have full reign on you. And that's exactly what they want. The occultists, those that are Luciferians, those that are doing things that show that they are demonically possessed, demonically controlled, that they have sold their souls, has put you and I in bondage for forever unless we break those chains by the name of Jesus. And until that happens, they're going to continue to do what they do. So that means that when you see Trump doing the sixes and the pyramid and all these other things, you have to ask yourself, what is going on? Now, before I continue here, I want to thank those who support me, those who have been donating to keep the lights on and everything running. Thank you. As we finish this year out, I'm trying to finish up some of the mechanics that I need to take care of in my personal life and my property, putting me in a position to be ready for those things that are coming. And once that's done, then I can get back into the research, get back into helping people in prayer. And for those who request and stuff, if you haven't listened to some of the old shows, I'm kind of on a standby for a while till I get this done. And I'm behind in my emails because I've got construction going on here on my property. And once I have that done, then I'll be able to get back. But when that's going to be, it's going to be sometime, not until next year, which is really just around the corner anyways. So with that, I have lots to talk about, but I'm going to go ahead and just bring Pat on. And we're going to be talking about the ghost cities in China and what they're for. And so as this is brought up, understand to know that people like Trump, people like Obama and the Bushes, and old man Bush is dead, goodbye and good riddance. Worms ate him up, let me tell you, and I know exactly where he's at. For those who support the Bushes, you need to understand who they are and the occult that they come from. But the point of it is that they all know about these cities in China. They all know about the directed energy weapons. They know about Agenda 21. They know about the Georgia Guidestones. And they sit there and they smile at you, pretending that everything's okay. And that's not okay. And so just please understand that those who are in office are in bed with those who are what they would call the elite, or they refer to themselves the elite. No, they're just demonized reptilians. And they are here to steal, kill, and destroy. But us as Christians, those who stand in the word and the authority and the blood of Jesus Christ, cannot be spectators. We must be participants in the battle to expose and to fight back. And so this information that we have tonight hopefully will open your eyes up to that. Okay, Pat, I've got you on. And go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about yourself before we get into the subject.
Sure. My name's Pat. And I've known Scott for about 20 years. We worked together years ago in Arizona. And then both of us left that company. And I went one direction and Scott went another. And it was just up until about a year ago that I was on YouTube. And I happened to look over to the right, and for those videos that are up there on YouTube, and I see Scott Hensler and his name up there, Scott Hensler. And so I thought, that's not the Scott Hensler I knew. It can't be. And I clicked on the video, and sure enough, it was. So later that day, I gave Scott a call. Yes, he's right. I was on the show. I think it was right around Christmas last year. And I talked about my story and how I got to where I was at. But it's funny because 20 years had passed by, and Scott and I were we came to the same place, really, as far as our belief systems. And I found that amazing. I always looked up to Scott. Scott is a genius when it comes to electronics. So I've never met anybody that knew more than he did. And I worked out in the construction industry for years, working in refineries and gas plants. Did the whole North Dakota thing, built several gas plants up in North Dakota. And I'd never met another guy like Scott that was as handy as Scott is. But I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and been saved for years. I fell away and got caught up in making money, something that all of us probably at one point in time, money becomes our God. And well, what came out of that, it wasn't good for me. So I'm back in the Lord's arms, and I'm grateful for that. And I've got a lot actually to be grateful to Scott for giving me some guidance on truth. Well, thank you, Scott, for all the truth that you've shared with me and your listeners. And it's been a real eye-opener and education over the last year. We've caught up 20 years of living. So I'm here with Scott. We're building a workshop for Scott. Tomorrow it's going to be 12 degrees. So when I left Arkansas, it was 65 degrees, and I live in the Ozarks in Arkansas. And so it's been quite a shock for me, even though I grew up in Alaska. Your body gets climatized to where you're at. Scott, is it good to have your friend back?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's funny because, we didn't see each other for a long time, and you went through some big events, and that was why you were on about a year ago. And I was going through the big events. For me, that life changed me into deliverance, into the understanding of the occult and witchcraft and divination, all the things that are actually in our governments, that are actually the things that are trying to keep us in bondage. So we're not going to be who God intended us to be, but remember that God is in control. And so regardless of what you went through and what I went through, we persevered. But it was a fight, and it's still a fight. It's always going to be a fight as long as this ground belongs to Lucifer, and it does until the return of Jesus Christ. We're going to be in that battle. So you yourself still get a battle once in a while. And a couple months ago, you had called me, and you were dealing with something and required some prayer. Did you want to talk about that?
Sure. Well, you would have to listen to my show. I would encourage you to go back and listen to the show that I was on, and I believe it was called Soul Takeover, and that can be found on MIXLR, correct?
Yeah,
Scott?
yeah, MIXLR. Uh-huh.
And that really tells you my story, because the story it's extensive and it's long and it's detailed, and in order to get the whole thing, you've got to listen to that show. But yeah, I had called Scott, and I hadn't planned on talking about this tonight, so Scott kind of surprised me with this. But I had been taken over really in 2014. A perfect storm came upon me, and I really was attacked in an evening, and was diagnosed with complex partial seizure disorder with extended postictal psychosis. So that was the medical term, but in reality, I had just been taken over by demons, and it was really a demon of murder and complete and total insanity. It came on all of a sudden, and it happened again. It happened. I suppose it was probably 2 months ago. My wife and I were in the vehicle. I'd had some mini seizures. No, these weren't seizures where you have convulsions, where what happens is you just go blank, and it's like falling asleep on your feet, and your head just gets rewired. And that's what the doctors would say. But what happened, we were driving down the road. My wife was driving, and I felt something rising up in me. I felt my body get extremely warm and hot. And it was the big boy, as Scott says, coming up. And it manifested. I was able to keep it down with prayer. But I knew I had to get Scott on the phone and get prayer for me immediately. So I sent him a message via text and just said, I need prayer now. I need deliverance now. And my wife and I had pulled into the Lowe's parking lot, and I said, just go inside, and I'll be in a minute. And I was struggling mentally and physically to keep this down, because when it came up before, it was just a spirit of destruction, like I said, murder and insanity. And it was coming up. It felt as though my lower extremity all the way, and it started kind of at my waist and then came up in through my chest, and that, like, there was just a little of me left, maybe just like 20% of me left. And it wanted to come all the way up and act out. And I was scared because of what happened before. And just to real quick, like, when it happened before, I had an armed standoff with the police for 6 hours. And I shot and killed my dog in the house, who is my best friend. And I just couldn't allow this to happen again. So Scott called me immediately, and we started talking, and I'll try to describe what happened. I went, as Scott started praying for me, I started to get complete and total tunnel vision. And I could feel it in my chest and in my throat. And it was as if, it was like as if there was a gas, like helium or something inside of me expanding. And as he continued to pray and ordered the demon to leave, my mouth opened. I didn't open it. My mouth opened. I breathed out, and it was gone. And as it left, my vision came back, and I was immediately better. It was instantaneous. I went from complete and total anxiety to walking into Lowe's. My wife said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm great. I'm fine." I said, "Let's just go home now. I'm very tired." And that's been gone. And I had always had probably what you would call a short fuse. And in the last several months, I've been a lot more patient. That big boy isn't in there anymore.
Yeah.
And he was bad. Whatever. I'm real curious about a lot of that. And Scott and I haven't talked extensively about it. But I do want to learn more, Scott.
Yeah. Well, they tend to act out their ugly nature. And so the demon that rises was one, you can call it a crazy maker, you can call it a murderess, you can call it whatever you want, but its total function as a spirit or a demon, the demonic realm in itself, was to still kill and destroy everybody. So trying to find participants is what demons do, and that's one of the subjects about tonight of those who were in authority, that when they find them, that, see, you didn't want to go along with it. You have a purpose. God has a purpose for you, and you made a choice not to serve the evil ones, even though you had issues when you were a child, you had issues as a teenager, and even through young adulthood. The point of it is though that even though you were infected with demons, you were not possessed. And since you were not possessed, you still had your conscience. It wasn't seared, and you would not receive it, even though there were times it would take you over and do what it does. And by making that decision and then calling me when you did was definitely the best thing, because this was a time that God had set aside for you to be delivered. There's no question about that. It was time to get that bad boy out of you, and you were ready. A lot of people are not ready. Some people do not want to let go of their demons. They want to keep their demons. They think it gives them power and control and safety. The whole thing is a lie, just like the lie that we have today in the world. And so with you finally coming to the point of surrendering and allowing me to expel that demon, because I was giving commands for it to come out, taking authority of it, grabbing it by the throat and sending it down. I always send them to the pit, forbidding them from ever coming back. And now there's a time of you say how your nature has changed and you don't have such a short fuse. Since it was in you so long, you have to relearn who you are without the demon. And that means you make conscious choices not to behave in the manner that you were accustomed when the demon was in. And unfortunately, there are those that will not accept that, and they continue in their behavior like that.
Scott, I just realized something about this spirit. My wife and I, when we met, I'm 46 now, and when we met, or pardon me, 45, soon to be 46. I get confused anymore. I guess I'm getting old. But when we met, I was 27, and I had never, ever experienced anybody's loving me the way that she had loved me. I really didn't even know how to love anybody. It wasn't possible for me to love anybody. I could care for somebody, and I could be loyal to my friends, but it wasn't possible for me to love anybody. I didn't know how. And I realized just now as we were talking that the turn came when really my life changed, started to change, and for the better when I met my wife. And this demon or demons, whatever it was, when it occurred in 2014 and the big thing happened with the standoff with the police, it wanted me to murder my wife. That's what it wanted. It wanted me to kill my wife. My wife really was the greatest influence in my life as far as building a relationship with Jesus Christ.
Right.
It was my wife. And when we were in the car, that's what it wanted me to do, was to kill my wife.
Right.
So if I had killed my wife, then I would have lost that, and just think of what would have happened afterwards.
Yeah,
with my life afterwards.
Right. It would have been over for you.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what it was trying to do. It knew the Holy Spirit was working. And so this was a last ditch effort of the demons to do what they do, and it failed. And thank God for that. So as we move on to the subject, this is the same circumstances that many who are in families of the Illuminati, families who were born into witchcraft, families who are heavy into divination. Daddy's a sorcerer and mom is a witch. We have those in the Illuminati, those in Freemason, those in other occult or Luciferian doctrines that have moved into positions in government, both city, state, county, all the way, through feds. And that means that since they did not repent, means that their conscience are seared, they have continued the great lie. And that is then to cooperate with evil, to become the vessel, to become the mechanism or the ability to finish what was started with Lucifer and the rebellion. And in order to do so, humans have to cooperate. Demons cannot do what they do unless humans sin, unless they cooperate. And so those, whether they're in China, whether they're in Japan, Australia, Great Britain, it doesn't matter where they're at, they're all working for the same demonic influence. And that is not just Lucifer, not just Satan, who is a devil, but there are devils. And so you have great powers of principalities and rulers, those things of the air, all over the world. And what they want to do is they want to bring us into a position to be slaughtered, to be controlled, to be nothing but slaves to the human element. And hybrids, we'll throw hybrids and grays and reptilians, we'll throw this all together because it's all part of the corruption. And in that corruption, again, the only way they can succeed is through humans. And so by stealing Jesus and God away, taking the word of God away, and eliminating deliverance. And the Christian church today has done that. So I'm going to throw them in the works too, that they are every bit as evil, because any time that you stand against the Great Commission of Jesus Christ, you're on the wrong side. And if you deny that Christians can have demons, if you deny the power and what this call is for us in the last days, then you're in bed with them. And that means that you are wicked, because those who are wicked in the definition are those who've been found guilty in their sins, unrepentive. And so that means today that whether they're of China, whether they're of North Korea, South Korea, United States, Canada, that in the Illuminati, in the New World Order, just as the Bushes are, they're one of the great deceivers of the United States, that what they want to do is round us up, put us into martial law, and to eliminate those who are basically a threat to what they call the state, those who are enemies of the state, they say. But in this is the mechanism of how they're going to do that. And so we're going to talk about ghost cities. Now, this subject has come up a little bit before. I've done some research in it, but I've been so involved in everything else. And it wasn't until you brought it up the other day that we have we want a better understanding of what these ghost cities are. So I'm just setting the stage for you, and I'll just turn it over to you to tell us what's going on with these cities in China.
Okay. It's very difficult to get information, a lot of information on China anyway, because Google has been banned in China for years now. So they are in their own system. I think it's called the Baidu. I'm certain I'm not pronouncing that correctly, Baidhu. But over the last several decades, the urban development, the buildup in China has nearly quintupled. Now, there's been, from their countryside, you're looking at a population of China of about 1.6 billion. We're at about 300 million, I guess, an estimate here in the United States. They have had an influx because of the massive amount of manufacturing that's happened in China. They've had an influx of their cities of about 260 million people over the last several decades. So they're moving out of those rural areas and into the urban areas. China is the model for the New World Order. And just to give you an idea, this buildup, it had began in the 90s, but it was not on a large scale, and they really hadn't perfected it. But it began around the turn of the millennium, 2000, 2003, where they really started booming and building these up. I mean, there's an estimated 64 million vacant properties in these cities in China, just in these ghost cities. And we're not talking about Beijing or Shanghai. We're talking about cities that, well, most people don't even know where they're at, but most of them are located along the coast on the Pacific Ocean. There are several in the interior of Mongolia where minerals are heavy and where there's a lot of mining. They have perfected their building. I was in construction for years. I got my start as a structural steel iron worker. And so we built, well, tall buildings. And it would take us probably a year from start to finish to bring the floors up and get the walls up around the building, a 20-story. So I've watched videos on YouTube, and they can bring up a 20-story skyscraper in 7 days, Scott.
And what did it take you on average?
A year.
Wow.
That's fast. A year is fast. I mean, you're screaming to get that done. But they've got it down. It's incredible. And we're not talking about just the skeleton of the building and the windows. We're talking the skeleton, the windows, the electrical, the walls, the air conditioning, everything. 7 days. There are 10 new cities of these ghost cities popping up annually. And there's around 50, they're estimating around 50 of these empty cities. Some of them are actually the size of Manhattan in New York. So how long can these cities remain vacant? That's the question.
Well,
Why are they building these cities? These cities have public buildings, hotels, apartment complexes, schools, malls, restaurants, even worship centers, and they're empty. Now, they do have some people living in them, but the streets are empty. There's no cars. There's traffic lights. There's sewer systems. This is amazing. This has never, ever been attempted in the history of mankind, as far as we know.
Well, the ones you say that are there most likely are caretakers or
They are
security to watch them, so there's not squatters.
It does
and
take in
vandalism.
infrastructure. I mean,
Sure.
you do have to have people to troubleshoot the problems, and because there's always problems with electrical problems, and things lights go out.
Yeah, plumbing.
Need somebody to change the light bulb.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for me to wrap my mind around why they're doing this. That's the question. You can always ask what this person did, but really the reason is, why are they doing it? Not what they're doing. Why are they doing this?
Well, I know that one of the first things when I questioned this was that because the manufacturing, we've had so much here in the United States that has left to go over to China for manufacturing. Remember Taiwan and Japan, they were the big ones. Well, they've lost a great deal of their manufacturing to China. And so they were accelerating at a point where they said that they needed to house the new workers. They were preparing for the future. But things have slowed down. Like Harbor Freight Company, for instance, you can buy cheap tools there. You can get things, at a reasonable price. And in my research, I found that Harbor Freight and all the money that is made actually goes into their military to continue their 200 million man army. So now that things have slowed down, yet they're still continuing the building of these cities. They haven't stopped, right?
No,
they haven't slowed down.
They have not stopped. They have not slowed down.
So that's not the truth then, what I was told originally, that they were preparing for the future. Because if things have slowed down and the economy and the dollars aren't there, you're not going to continue to build. So they're doing something else. They're doing something that is ominous, something that brings a little fear to myself, and understanding that China, wanting to be a world power, and they are, but they want to bring it to the point where maybe they're bigger than Russia and bigger than the United States. And they certainly have the nuclear power. They certainly have the technologies. They have the energy weapons. They have the ability to do anything that they want. They have the satellites. And basically, we gave it to them, or they stole it from us. Because I remember during the semiconductor times when I was working back in the 80s, that the Chinese spies were very big coming into, like Motorola, General Electric, some of the other corporations that made semiconductors, otherwise integrated circuits, and they were constantly stealing those trades. But then the Clintons came in and started handing them everything. The Chinese have an office within the U.S. Patent Office. So every patent that is submitted, otherwise, if I come up with an idea and I draw it out and I get an attorney to put a stamp on it, we send it in to them, it goes over the desk of the Chinese. And this is supposed to be proprietary information, proprietary inventions for the inventor to have the first choice. But the Chinese see it before we see it as the public. And so something's going on here. And again, thank you, Clintons, for that. So with that, I know you've got quite a bit more information. You want to maybe give your view of what potentially is going on?
Well, it's ominous indeed, Scott. one of the questions is where's this? I asked myself, where's the money coming from to build this? A lot of it's coming from outside of China. The international bankers, names that you know, the Rockefellers, the Rochesters, names like these, international bankers, manufacturing moguls. And it's also interesting to note that the Mandarin language is now being taught in high schools. Some of them 4-year courses. I wasn't aware of this until I started looking into this. I got out of high school in 1990, and there was no Chinese languages offered then. They were doing a lot of importing, and we were doing a lot of business with China then. But it's also interesting to note that Trump's grandchildren are learning the Mandarin language.
Yeah, I understand his son, his youngest son now, is actually learning that as well.
And his grandchildren.
Let me point out that when I was in Taiwan, the language Taiwanese was not used for commerce. Mandarin Chinese was used for commerce because it has a numerical system. It has the ability to count money in exchange. And so Mandarin Chinese is fully capable of being a language used for commerce. And so teaching us the language, or at least having the fundamentals of it, I think isn't for commerce. I think it is for other things. And that may be because at a certain point in time, they, since the Chinese owns a great deal of the United States, since the collateral that the Clintons used of our national parks belongs to the Chinese, and I bet you a lot of you don't know about that, that there's a day of payback, a day that they're going to pull the notes back in, and we're going to have to pay up. And that potentially means that since, if you're familiar with the straw man, that when you are born, your name, who you are on your birth certificate, goes on the New York Stock Exchange. You are a commodity. You are worth. You have worth. And the Clintons sold you out. And so when the Chinese call their note in, that means you and me, not just our homes, not just the national parks, not just things of all the manufacturing, like Hershey and some of the other brands. I understand Budweiser belongs to the Chinese now. This has become ridiculous, and especially with the borrowing of money. We have the fiat currency, which means there's no backing of it. The gold standard's been gone. There's no gold in Fort Knox. There's no gold in any of these reserves. And so when they call it in, they're going to want people. They're going to want property. Can you maybe bring something out on that?
Sure. Even Harley Davidson, Scott, I believe has moved. Was it Taiwan or was it China?
Probably China. Taiwan would love to have it, but I don't think they do.
The outlaw bikers are still going to ride their Harley. So
sure. Yeah.
Yes. Now it's important to point out that these cities, they have different types of residences for different classes of people. There's the small, just your basic flat, small apartment complex or apartment. It's just for a worker. But there's also luxury buildings for the mega rich, the elite. And we have to speculate because there's not a lot of information out there. But the amount of these cities, it is just not, it doesn't add up. It doesn't add up for the buildup of Chinese manufacturing. Yes, they're manufacturing more, but it's not exponentially increasing as it was in the years prior. So I think really that the reason that these are being brought up or built up is what I said earlier. China is the model for the new world order. That's what Kissinger and those people, they love them. They love it. And there's nothing, it's just pure evil. Some of the things that are happening in China are just pure evil. So the ultimate goal for years and years and years, we have been the light on the hill to spread the gospel, prosper other nations, spread freedom throughout the known world. But I believe the ultimate goal is to move that to China now and to get away from the U.S. And the New World Order, when we speak of the New World Order, we're speaking about a world without God.
Yes.
We're speaking about a satanic order, coined by the way, coined by our favorite president who just passed away, the New World Order, George Herbert Walker Bush.
And when we say favor, we're being facetious.
Yes. But the ultimate goal, I believe, is to bring down the U.S. Europe and the United States have both, over the past bit, experienced just an absolute influx of migrants, Muslim migrants throughout Europe. And I'm being told that we can't even imagine what's happening. The churches in London, in Greater London alone, are being turned into mosques in some cases. That's what the influx is. And it's easy to destroy a country from within. And that is one of the ways that it's done. Yeah. And it has been done here. I've grown up in areas where there was a huge migrant. We lived in Washington State in a row crop and fruit area, which is Yakima, Washington. And it's the town I lived in is now 86% Hispanic. And it's hard pressed to even find signs in English. Now I moved away from there. I had to get out of there. It was not a good place for me. But I think that's the ultimate goal is to bring down the United States. And there's only a few ways really that I believe that this can be done. And I believe God can intervene. But I'm hard pressed to believe that God's going to step in. We've murdered 60 million babies. That blood is on this nation's hands.
Yeah, it's also used as food, as sugars. Pepsi for one.
That's just one thing. And the other thing is just the degradation of the moral degradation within society. Look at the TV programs that were on years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, even 20 some years ago. They're nothing compared to what they are now. We are godless as a nation, as a whole. We are godless. There's a remnant left, but there's very few. And even our churches are corrupted. There's corruption in our churches. Zionism is at an all-time high. Kushner and Ivanka, major Zionists. And they're right up there. Well, that's the son-in-law of the president of the United States.
Whose address, by the way, on their building is 666.
Yeah, 666. So we can't do anything about this. So there's nothing we can do other than pray to Jesus Christ. But there's several ways that this takeover could occur. I believe that the new world order is going to be built in China. That's it. And in order to do that, in order to build a new world order, you have to bring that beacon of light that's on the hill, and that is the United States. It has to come down. It has to topple down. And there's several ways that could be done. Now, we are the breadbasket, one of the biggest breadbaskets for the world. We've been feeding the world, the third world, for years.
Right.
And so you can't take that away because they're going to need that. They're going to need the food. They're going to need the food. They're going to need, and we are just, we're loaded with natural gas, oil. We're swimming in it. And one of the ways that they can do this, Scott, is by way of an EMP explosion. And that's detonating a nuclear device. It has to be detonated about 100 miles above.
Well, let me point out that is one of the techniques, but they've perfected through scalar technology, the same ability through electromagnetics without detonation. So otherwise radio transmitters. So the Soviets have it. They used it against our ships, and so it doesn't have to be, though it's probably the choice to do so. But this technology is in the hands of the Chinese as well.
It takes approximately, if we're speaking on nuclear missiles, it takes about 6 to bring the grid down. So North Korea, Iran, any of these other countries that are on the gold standard, by the way, it's not going to be them. That comes down to 2 different countries that would be capable of that. Unless not, I don't want to discount Israel, but I mean, in all chances, it's China and it's Russia. That's who brings us down. So you bring down the grid, we're in the dark, and then you bring in nuclear missiles, not to the population, but tactical nuclear missiles to wipe out our military industrial complex.
Our bases,
yes.
right.
In our ability to fight back.
Seattle, for instance, that would be
correct.
A major place to
yes.
hit.
Yes. So you take out the military, then there's nothing left. That's all America is anymore. We're just, manufacturing's gone. We're just the world police force.
Yeah.
And a good one at that. You know, I'm being not good as in behavioral good, but we're top notch.
Successful.
Yes, very successful.
Right.
So let's talk about the aftermath, because we can't do anything. We can't stop them. We cannot stop these people from doing what they're going to do. They hold all the cards. They have all the money.
Thank you, Clinton.
And so we can't stop this. But let's talk about the aftermath of this, because I believe this has to occur to bring in a one world government. I believe that America has to go down. Has to. What is the aftermath? The aftermath is we don't even have any communications. Without communications, we won't even know what's happening. All of a sudden, the power's gone. Then all of a sudden, the grocery store's empty out. Then you can't get your medicine. If you're a diabetic and a type 1 diabetic, that's life-threatening.
Yeah.
Not to mention what do we have? 25% of the population on SSRIs.
Well, just the medication, the psych meds,
yes, 25%.
Everything else, alcoholics, drug addicts, they won't be able to get their fixes, their medications.
This is the aftermath of this, and no food delivered either. By the way, no vehicles running.
Right. Well, the thing about food is there was a time when they were in warehouses and they could be supplied, but now that's not the case. As soon as they come off the ships from China, they immediately go on the trucks and they're delivered. Well, when that all stops, the food stops. There is no supply.
Yes, our logistics in this country, our logistics supply is second to none.
Yeah.
You go anywhere else in the world, and you will not see anything that compares to the United States. The Europeans, when they come here, are blown away when they come in our grocery stores.
Yeah.
Shocked. They can't believe it. Well, when that all goes away, what then? Starvation? That's what we're looking at.
Right. And remember, as I've talked before, that the population in this world has not been through deliverance, does not believe in Jesus Christ. And when chaos occurs, then the lack of love or the respect of your fellow man, your brethren, goes away. And so then those who are demonized or demon-possessed, the ugly natures of the demons will manifest through them, and all hell will break loose. Absolute chaos.
We're too comfortable here, Scott.
Yeah.
And that's really going to be our downfall. People are just too comfortable. I mean, you know, if we're thinking about losing all this food, all this medical, that's just with everything that's within reach. What about the hospitals?
Yeah.
What about all the hospitals?
And we were talking about law enforcement too. The local law enforcement, whether it's city, whether it's county sheriffs, under Department of Homeland Security and FEMA direction, that they'll be reassigned to different counties or different cities. But the question is, are they going to do it? Are they going to stay home and protect their own families? I don't even know how any of this could even make sense, even to the New World Order, other than just absolute chaos that we end up just killing each other off or dying through starvation. Before we go, I wanted to remind everyone that the shows I've done before on the fallen gong and the organ harvesting. So whenever there's roundups that because of Facebook and other media, they know who you are, they know who your children are, they know who's healthy, they know through when you do your ancestry checks, and many people are doing that as gifts, that your DNA, and then they look at your blood and see what your health level is, that many people are selected for organ harvesting right now or projected in the future. So in the roundups of potentially being brought over to China or anywhere else, that will take place to sustain that upper echelon of individuals. I just wanted to bring that out before we run out of time.
It is. You could survive this, Scott, though, if you prepare.
Yeah.
In the construction world, we used to have a saying, it was the 7 Ps. Proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance. And before any of you get mad about me using the piss word, it's used 6 times in the Bible. So check your KJV out. 6 times it's used in the Bible. It's not a curse word.
Not your NIV.
So not your NIV, KJV. So we got to talk. We need to talk a little bit about preparedness. So you got to think about these things. Without any electricity, how are we going to heat our homes? Do you have a wood stove, or do you have natural gas or propane? What about shelter? What about food? What about water? There's things you can do. One is prepare a way out. Prepare a way out of the situation that you're in. Keep maps in your cars. Explore alternate routes out of the area. You have to have a food supply. If you do not have a food supply, get one. Get what you can. It's fairly inexpensive. $120 for a month's supply of food that'll last, has a shelf life of 20 years. Have a backpack close by, or have some bags packed if you have to leave the house. Have change your clothes out in the winter to the summer, or winter and summer in those bags, and have it handy. During the Revolutionary War, our soldiers were called Minutemen because they could be ready and out the door in a minute. And that's kind of how you got to think. You got to be prepared for this. And guns and ammo.
Yes.
Guns and ammo. Gold, forget about it. What good's gold going to do you? Food, guns and ammo, and water.
And water.
And if you're in a city, if you're in a big city, you need to have at least some extra water there. At least 10 days worth of water.
Well, let's use an example here. Las Vegas. Okay. The water table and the access to water is 0. So they have large pipes that come up through the filtration out of the Colorado River. When all that power stops, there's no more pumps to bring the water there. All of Las Vegas goes dry. And you cannot live without water, especially in the high temperatures. And so that's a city that's a sitting duck. And I would venture to guess that a very select few have ever thought about that, whether they're storing water, they have bug out bags, whatever the circumstances are, that so few people are looking at this. This is one of the things that the New World Order is counting on.
That's correct.
Because people bought the lie. And by prolonging the hype, people burn out on it. The sky is falling, and they get tired of hearing that, another
right.
crying wolf. But never forget that. Always understand that they do have an agenda. This has been a long term that they've been working on for hundreds, if not thousands of years, and it's finally coming to a head. When? I don't know. But I need to again pass on the fact that whether you want to believe in Bush or not, he's one of the game players. I will guarantee you that he knows of the circumstance or the plan for the potential roundup of bringing people to China for these cities. The question is, who are these people that they're going to select? Well, I'm 62. You know, they're going to take me out. What good am I? I'm going to argue with them. I'm going to fight with them. And believe me, those demonized individuals know quite well that I know they're demons. I know they have demons. I know what demons they have, and they don't want to be found out. So they're just going to take me out. So who are they going to go after? Well, ladies and gentlemen, they're going to go after your children. And if you're 20 something years old and you're female and you're fertile, they're going to take you. And that's what they want. And they're going to use you as slaves. They're going to use you as breeders. They're there to, that whole establishment is there to serve them.
The futile system.
Yes.
The feudal system. But even just back to the water, even just having it going, I mean, what's a case of water at Walmart? You know, $4 for a case of, for about 40 bottles of water. Having eight packages like that, that's 320 bottles of water. You always keep that in your house and then use them. And as you use that water, replace it. And then it's always there. You can survive a long time on just water.
One of the arguments is they say, well, you can't sustain for 6 months. Well, you know what? If you can sustain for 30 days, 3 weeks into it, you'll be darn glad that you did.
Yes. Especially
your children. You want to look at your children as they're starving, as they're dehydrating, and they're sick from trying to drink bad water. At least prolong things as long as you can until there is something that comes along. There may be divine intervention. And for those who were not prepared, who didn't have the oil in their lamps, need I say anything more? The point of it is that we do know that things are coming. This is not a doom and gloom. This is the understanding of the truth. And that we have a job to do. We have a responsibility to maintain as believers, one who operates in the authority and power of Jesus Christ to be there for others. Think about that.
Divine intervention could happen.
Yes, absolutely. Especially when God's people cry out.
Yes. And there's talk about a coming cold spell.
Yes.
Extended cold spell. That could be the divine intervention that stops all of this.
Right. And that's going to be very heavily based on the solar cycle. And I'll probably talk more about that. But weather is changing. You know, they were talking about global warming, which the whole thing was nothing more than a lie for carbon tax. But now we have a situation that is every bit as deadly, and that is the cold, especially for those in the north. You know, even the deserts are deadly. You know, when I did search and rescue, hypothermia takes more people out. They go on a day walk. They get a little turned around. You know, it's 70 degrees outside and it drops down to below 60, 55. That's one of the traps that people can fall into, and their core temperatures drop. They become like they have flu because they can't think because their core temperature dropped, just like if you had a high temperature, and they become disoriented, and that's when they perish. So we're very fragile. And so just take a note that the fact that your children can dehydrate much quicker, especially if they get diarrhea. And so think of it this way. When you child-proof a house, you go through the house on your hands and knees and you look at what a child can get into. The electrical sockets, is there a penny on the floor? So look at life, look at what your children are going to be dealing with, and prepare yourself for that. You want to close out?
Sure. There was a couple of other things. If you can survive, if you're in a city, that's a worse place to be. During the Great Depression, when everything happened, 90% of people lived in rural areas. It's the opposite now. 90% of people live in urban areas, a population of 25,000 or greater. So if you're in a city, and I particularly a large city, whether it's Las Vegas, Phoenix, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Atlanta, Dallas, etc., if you can squat for 30 days, there won't be a lot of people left at that point. We're
Yeah,
talking
that's
if
true.
this is the scenario,
Yeah.
if this is the scenario and power goes and the supplies go, nobody, I know very few people who have extra food. Very, very, very few. 3 days, 4 days max. But if you can make it 30 days, you can walk out unscathed.
And you brought up a point there that when you are hungry, you're willing to surrender, and so
That's
then you
right.
would be then captured by them. You walk into the FEMA camps without any conflict, and so if you can sustain yourself and make it through those times, then you're going to be ahead of the game. And just like you said, the first 24, 48 hours, the first week or so are going to be probably the worst, because
Right.
that's when everyone's just going to be going after each other, and it's chaos.
It's chaos. And do not tell anybody that if you do supply food or if you do have those things, you don't share that with people.
Right.
That's your own little secret.
Certainly, if the Holy Spirit speaks to you to help somebody, but to advertise would bring your demise. Absolutely.
It would. And you need a way to protect yourself also. You also need a way to protect yourself.
Right. Okay. Well, we're out of time. I hope this has made some sense to you. Thank you, Pat, for coming on. And we'll do some follow-ups too on this, because this is a subject that affects all of us. All right. Good night.